Dale Garland, welcome to the podcast.
Debo, it's so good to talk with you, buddy. It's so good to see you.
I'm so glad to finally have you on the show. And you gave me a personal phone call to my cell phone about 10 days ago to inform me that I'd cleared the wait list. You invited me into the 2023 Hardrock 100. It's funny, actually, because I was with my in-laws at the time, and I pull out my phone and I see a missed call from Durango, Colorado.
And you go, who do I know in Durango, Colorado? Huh?
I knew I was first on the wait list, and all of a sudden I got goosebumps. And sure enough, I have a voicemail from Dale Garland.
There it is. Well, you know what, Dylan, it's so funny because those are some of the funnest calls that I get to make every year. You know, just because, you know, like you or other people, I mean, this event, and we can talk a little bit more about this, you know, it means so much to people, and to be able to sit there and say, hey, we would love for you to come and join us, and for them to be able to go, yeah, heck yeah, you know, it's so cool. It's kind of like Santa Claus. You know, Billy Simpson used to say, you're like Santa Claus because you keep making all these presents and stuff like that.
And so that's standard process for you. When somebody pulls out of the active start list, you make a personal phone call? I
do. Yeah, I do.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to further paint the picture of me receiving this news, again, I called you back immediately and you missed my call, and I left you a voicemail and I said, I would graciously like to accept your invitation. And then my brother-in-law was like, hey, let's have a whiskey to celebrate this. So
there you go.
I had a whiskey, and now I'm going to teetotal. I'm going to on the straight and narrow until race day, Dale. So anyway, thank you for that call.
You bet.
Yeah.
You bet.
And thanks for joining here on the podcast. Sure. I wanted to start with a fun little introspective question I use as icebreaker, and that is just, what makes you you? What are your unique personality traits, your characteristics that make you unique, both positive and negative, however you want to.
You know, when you asked me to think about that, it really was kind of a real, like, whoa, that's a really reflective question that kind of took me a second to kind of think about. But I think if I were to kind of maybe say two or three different concepts, I think the first one that makes me is, anybody who knows me knows I'm a fairly optimistic and fairly positive person, but not in a way that is kind of Pollyannic or anything like that. It's realistic optimism. And that kind of comes from, you know, kind of this concept of I'm in charge of choosing my attitude every day. And so I can kind of have control over that. And so I try to be realistic, but I also try to be optimistic. And I think that really helps, you know, when you're trying to figure out something. It's like, well, let's look at all sides of the issue, but I'm going to try to be positive and try to figure out ways to make things work. I think the other thing, as I was kind of thinking about this today, I'm not conflict averse, but I'm not somebody who seeks conflict. I like to put myself in positions where I know it's kind of a trite kind of thing, but I look to get into a situation where everybody can win, you know, that win-win situation. And how can I best kind of make it good for everybody? So those are a couple of things I think.
Incredible. Yeah. Awesome. On the optimism point, it reminds me, and choosing your own attitude. I had a conversation with somebody recently where I was kind of lamenting certain things that we were dealing with on the business side of things. This is somebody who's sort of been an unofficial mentor. Right. And he just said, you know, there's two things you can control: how hard you work and whether or not you're a good person.
That's right.
And so it's honestly a very simple, almost cliche thing to say, but also kind of help reframe, you know, when I am in these difficult situations, to think, okay, there's two things I can control. How hard am I working? I work really hard. Am I a good person? Okay, that's the variable that I
and that gives you a reason to go out and do the things that you do.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, I was walking around yesterday, and it was, you know, like, I was getting my tires changed on my car, and it just dawned on me. It's like, here I am in a beautiful part of the country. I'm retired. I have money. All these positives. I just had all these positives. It was like, what do I have to be bitter about or be pissed off about? So
Beautiful. So, Dale, I want to begin our official conversation here talking about the Joel Zucker Memorial Scholarship. So, to begin that, who was Joel Zucker and what is this scholarship?
Sure. Well, Joel Zucker was a runner, a Hardrock runner. He came from New York every year, and this was way back at the very beginning, and not at the very beginning, but early on in our history. And he was a librarian in Upper New York. Came out every year, was just kind of that positive. I mean, he had a lot of positive energy. He loved dogs. He loved, everybody was his friend, that kind of thing. And ran Hardrock, finished Hardrock. And then one year he was driving back to with some friends back to Albuquerque to fly back to New York, and he suffered a heart attack or an aneurysm. And that was really kind of like a holy mackerel, that was like, it hit us all. It hit us all really hard, because it was somebody who had just ingratiated himself and immersed himself in the hard rock culture. And so being a librarian, being somebody who's in education, we started to talk with his sister and his mom and like, how can we continue to honor the memory of Joel? And fortunately for that, at that time, Andy Crone and Charlie Thorne, who were both kind of at Hardrock at the beginning. Charlie was one of our founding members, and his wife Andy had gotten to become really good friends with Joel. He'd always stayed on their floor or something at their house in Silverton, and so they kind of took the lead and said, let's create a scholarship. And so that was 24 years ago. We started contributing money, and I just got the announcement today. This year we donated $43,000 to kids pursuing either starting college or post-second or trade school or something like that, or continuing with their post-secondary education. And now in Joel's name, we've given away a little over $288,000 in his name.
It's a beautiful thing. And the reason I wanted to start here is its connection to education. Right. Of course, I know you retired last year, but you made your career in teaching. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to talk about or ask you why you chose to devote your life to education, and now in retirement, how you reflect on that career. Yeah,
that's a good question. It's kind of, education was part of it was the family business. My mom's a teacher, my dad's a teacher, my dad's wife's a teacher, my sister's a teacher, my brother's a teacher, that kind of thing. But so it was something that kind of just I'd grown up around and that kind of thing. But when I was able to make those decisions, and I didn't come to that career as my first career after I left high school. But the more I began to think about how I wanted to make a difference in the world and what I wanted to do. First, I was in business and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the challenge and that kind of thing. But at some point, that little voice in the back of my head keeps saying, work with kids. And so I just, at one point, it made sense for me to step away from the business world and get involved with education. And it was really interesting, Dylan, because even within the area of education, it became very apparent to me who I could work with and who I couldn't. I couldn't work with, I'm not smart enough, creative enough to be an elementary school teacher. I don't know if I'm patient enough to be a middle school teacher. So kind of by default, I ended up being a high school teacher. Mm-hmm. And I had a great career at Durango High School. That was the only place I ever taught. That's the only place I ever really wanted to teach. And I retired from there in June of last year.
And you were so popular that your local newspaper, the Durango Herald, wrote an article celebrating your amazing tenure. And it said that you taught social studies, but that your students really knew you as somebody who taught life lessons and philosophy and mindset and positivity, which is where we started this conversation. So maybe tell us specifically what you taught and maybe that mix between academic and practical.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And that, and I think we can all, anybody listening to your podcast can probably imagine those teachers that they just had good relationships with. And they had, if you say, who's your favorite high school teacher or what teachers did you get along with or whatever, we all have those teachers. And so for me, teaching at its core was really, it wasn't about content because I taught a lot of history. I taught a lot of European history, US history, economics, things like that. And I don't know how much they're going to remember from that, but I think what they will remember is I knew somebody who cared about me and I knew somebody who helped me figure things out and that kind of thing. And somebody who made me feel safe. And so those kind of things, I think, were the things that I was real proud of. The other thing that I was very involved with was developing student leaders, young student leaders through our student leadership program. And so putting them, a lot of us would call it student council, but I chose to look at it more as student leadership and how can you grow leaders and how can you grow high school students to become better, not only human beings, but again, leaders and people who are going to lead us down the road. I always joke that say, I got to do this right because you're going to be taking care of me in a few years. So I want to make sure that you're doing it right.
Yeah, it's up to you, the next generation.
That's it, exactly.
Maybe tell us some of your principles of leadership. Obviously, you're the leader of the Hardrock 100, and you probably have to embody these principles a lot. Is there anything you want to share there?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think there's two things. And one of the other things you asked about was, who are some of my, I guess, almost like role models.
Yeah.
But I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second. But when my wife and I were we got married and we went on a honeymoon to Seattle and came across this place called the Pike Place Fish Market. I don't know if you know where that is or whatever.
I do.
Throwing the fish and the whole thing.
Yep.
Yeah. At the time, it really didn't hit me, but then I saw a video on it and it was something that it hit me at the right time, at the right place at the right time. And and I adopted it as kind of my mantra, if you will, the 4 principles of the fish philosophy. And that is, we're going back to that choosing your attitude, making people stay, being there for people, and then having some fun while you're at it. And I tried to keep those 4 principles kind of front and center as I worked through my high school, my teaching career.
Fantastic. And your career, it seems like, was 31 years long.
Right.
And if I do the math myself, it means that you started that teaching career in the early 90s, right around the time that the Hardrock 100 began. So I'm wondering whether that's a coincidence or whether now, looking back, do you feel like in some ways that was preordained, that these two things evolved simultaneously?
Well, it wasn't planned per se. But the third thing that happened in that particular point in my life was I used to run. I started ultra distance running in 1988 when we ran the Colorado Trail, when the Colorado Trail opened. And then I remember it so clearly. I was racing up at Leadville, the Leadville 100, and I had to walk down Hope Pass, and I go, wow, that's really weird. And make a long story short, I went in and I basically blown through all the cartilage in my hip, and I had to have a hip replacement at 32 years old. And it was just something that my orthopedic surgeon and my physical therapist and stuff, they just said, you just had the bad luck of the draw. Your hips never formed right. And so, but by then I'd gotten so not involved, but gotten to know the ultra running community and like the people and that kind of thing. It's like, what else can I do? And it was just at that particular time that Gordon Hardman put that article in the ultra running magazine, said, hey, I've got this idea to do this crazy 100-mile run down in Southwest Colorado. I'm looking for some people to help. And I go, there's my in.
There's my calling from the universe.
There's my calling. That's it.
So tell us about the first running in 1992. I went back and looked, and it looked like there was 18 total finishers. Right. And the locals in Silverton probably didn't even know that this race was going on. Now it sort of takes over town. Did you have a sense at the time that you were onto something truly special with the event?
No, not a bit, not a bit. And you and I, you and I both know that ultra running in 2023 is a whole lot different than it was earlier. And we've seen growth and evolution in the sport and things like that. But back in the early 90s, it was just a bunch of yahoos getting together in the mountains to try to do something, this concept. And the first couple of years, the first year in particular, I just remember I'm surprised I didn't kill anybody. Let me just say that, because very few, I didn't know what I didn't know, and so being not really knowing how to mark a course, not really knowing about weather and stuff like that, it was something that, and again, there were five of us that kind of put it together. The aforementioned Charlie Thorne, Rick Trujillo, who a lot of people will know from Uray, John Kappas, who was a scientist at Los Alamos, but he also grew up in Telluride. Gordon Hardman, who was kind of the originator of the idea, and then me. So yeah, those first couple of years, we were just kind of flying by the seat of our pants and things like that. But luckily we had that 5 people who had a real strong commitment to what we were doing. And so every year we would evaluate, reevaluate, try to get better, those kinds of things. But all those
so
things,
funny.
Yeah. All those things like kissing the rock, totally by accident, because I didn't know, I forgot to plan a finish line. So it's like, well, just go touch that rock, or, so all these things kind of were,
It's funny. All those accident. Great traditions evolve organically like that. It brings to mind, I was at an event here in the Bay Area a couple months ago for the Dipsy race, which is of course 100, more than 100 years old. And their tradition is that if you finish in the top 35, you get a black shirt. And somebody asked the question is how that came to be. Why is it that you honor the first 35? And one of the old timers said, well, we went to the t-shirt screen printing company in the 70s and they gave us a discount if we bought 36 shirts. So we print one with number 0 and then we honor the first 35 finishers.
There you go.
It's just like, what a great story, isn't it?
Yeah.
Completely arbitrary t-shirt printing volume discount turns into this proud tradition for decades and decades. How did the idea for alternating the direction of the course manifest itself? Because it's such a fun, unique element that adds so much character to the race. Right.
Well, Gordon Hardman, again, who I call the founder of Hardrock, had kind of 2 ideas. This was in Southwest Colorado. They were going through kind of a downturn in the economy, which was based a lot on mining. And so he was looking for ways to bring some economic development. So maybe Gordon didn't understand, because we have kind of over the years become a little bit more of an economic engine to some of these places. But he was looking for a way to bring some healthy tourism and economic development to the 4 mining towns that were being kind of impacted by this downturn in the mining industry. And so the original plan, as it was to start and finish on a rotating basis around every of the 4 areas. So one year we would start and finish in Silverton, and one year we'd start and finish in Uray, But as you kind of mentioned, when we went to a lot of the town chambers of commerce and stuff like that, they were like, yeah, we don't really care, except for Silverton. Silverton kind of got it early. So that after about 3-4 years, we said, we're just going to keep it in Silverton. But then we wanted to figure out how could we make it unique. And that was when we came up with the idea of doing clockwise and counterclockwise runs.
Yeah. So it's so fun. And I'll be going counterclockwise this year for the 2nd time. So
there you go.
That means I got to stay in the sport.
You got to stay in it because you got to do the clockwise thing, right? You got to see what you can't see during the night.
No hip replacements for me, knock on wood, not for a little while, not until I get that clockwise run.
Yeah.
While we're on the subject of history, I'd love to have you introduce the audience to a couple of characters who people probably don't know, but who are integral to the Hardrock story. That is Kirk Apt and Betsy Kallmeyer. Can you just say a few words about each of them?
They are the man and the woman with the most Hardrock finishes of anybody. and they have been at Hardrock. There's nothing left for them to prove, but I think they both embody the spirit of Hardrock, of being in the mountains for the love of being in the mountains. Because, to a lot of people now, and again, you and I know, things have changed and the options for people are so much more numerous in terms of events and things like that. But to Kirk and Betsy, they just love being in the San Juans, and they love the community, and they love being around us as an organization and that kind of thing. And, Kirk's got 26 finishes and Betsy's got 23, 24. So there's nothing left. I mean, their legacy is set when it comes to Hardrock, and their legacy is set in terms of mountain running. I mean, there's, not much more they need to do or prove. But they are, every year when I see both of them, it's like, it's good to see you again. They go, yeah, there's no place I'd rather be in July than in Silverton.
At the briefing that you do every year, you have a really fun tradition. At least I've been there multiple times, even on years when I haven't raced, where you ask people to stand up who finished the race, the run, I should say. I want to come back to that. And then you say, sit down, or say, keep standing if you have more than 5 finishes. A bunch of people sit down if you have more than 10. A bunch of people sit down, or keep standing if you have more, etc. And eventually it gets down to Betsy and Kirk, and everybody sitting there. It's a goosebumps experience to just pay homage to the longevity and the consistency that they both embody. And it feels like Hardrock is deeply personal and something that means the world to them. And they're great representatives for the culture and the philosophy of the race.
Exactly. And their humility. I mean, and Kirk is so thankful, and Betsy too. And I would be doing Blake Wood a disservice if I didn't put his name in there too, because he is the third. I mean, those are the top 3, just their commitment and their willingness to share their experiences and things like that just make them really special people, all 3 of them.
Awesome. Yeah. Shout out Blake Wood. He shook me down for my service requirement for him also.
I just talked to him about it today. We still got 4 or 5 people that are, it's like, well, what are we going to do? He goes, I'll give them one more call and one more text. And that kind of thing.
So I've stumbled a couple of times and corrected myself about the difference between the run and the race. And I'd love to hear you expand on this. I'm sure you've talked about this a lot in the past, but it feels obviously like a conscious, intentional, deliberate differentiation that you do. I recall at the award ceremony or the graduation ceremony after my finish, you make a point when you recognized the first finishers there to not use the word champion, to not do anything that traditional award ceremonies do. I mean, you obviously recognize the skill and talent necessary to complete the loop as fast as some people do, but you make a point of using the word first finisher rather than champion, and using the word run instead of race. Can you just expand on that philosophy?
Yeah, sure. Well, and it is kind of a deliberate thing. And I guess and I know, as ultra running has evolved and things like that, times and places and things like that are important to a lot of people. And we want to recognize, like you say, I think that was really good what you said, that we want to recognize the skill it took for people to do it in a certain amount of time. So we do keep times, we do, but we also want to say, the mountains don't care, they don't care if you are Dylan Bowman or, anybody else, so we purposely want to say it's an event that pits humans against Mother Nature. And we celebrate everybody. We try. We bring everybody together at the end of it, and but the emphasis has never been on the racing component of it. It's on the completion and what it takes each and every individual to make it. And then we like I say, we do try to recognize everybody at our awards banquet.
It's a special thing, and it, I think, stands out for all of us who've done dozens of races all over the world. There is that special feeling to Hardrock and finishing, and then that graduation ceremony where it really does feel, I don't know, there's more of a collective feeling than a hierarchical feeling to it.
Well, I'm glad you said that, because that's our intent. Yeah. And I'm glad that kind of comes through, because, that's what we hope happens. Yeah, it certainly does. So Dale, I'd love to talk about the tension you must experience sometimes. Mm-hmm. Sure. As the only run director in the history of the Hardrock 100, as the sport has exploded, what have been the biggest challenges for you in navigating that, staying true to the traditions and to the legacy, while also, trying to be progressive and changing with the times, et cetera? Yeah. And that there you hit it right there. How do you balance that, the tradition and the legacies and what got us to this point, with remaining relevant and current and topical and meeting the needs of a vastly different group of runners than there were there in 1992, 1993, 1994. And so it's an innovative process that we kind of think about. So I'm gonna go back to the challenges, because I think the two challenges that we face is just and we're not the only event that's feeling this pinch of being oversubscribed by factors of 10 and that kind of stuff. We're probably a little bit more in the bullseye a little bit sometimes, but we're definitely not the only one. I mean, Craig Thornley's doing the same. He's facing the same thing at Western, and it's prevalent. So it's for us, it's trying to come up with a way to strike a balance between bringing people to Silverton, at least in the entry field, who are either new to the sport and want to experience it, or are the keepers of the Hardrock culture, the Hardrock traditions, those things that you've kind of already alluded to. And so we've tried to strike a balance in our lottery of doing that, by the numbers and that kind of stuff, and where we actually have 4 lotteries, because layered on top of that is, as more and more women get involved, we felt like that was important to recognize that. So now our women's lottery, the number of women who toe the line at Hardrock is equal to, percentage-wise, to the number of women who apply in our initial lottery. So it is a really fine line, because then you get people, as I said, Betsy, Kirk, they come every year and they know the culture and they know that stuff, but trying to keep that culture with people who this may be their only shot at Hardrock, and it may be a bucket list, or because of the lottery or the things like that, they may or may not ever have a chance to come back. So our committee only has that short period of time to tell them, this is why we think Hardrock's special and we're glad you're here. And that takes some work, and it takes some doing things with intent, with some intention. And the other thing I think that we're all dealing with in some form or fashion is technology and how that's impacting things. And so, we're trying to do things that, for a variety of reasons, whether it's runner tracking or, satellite tracking or other things that we're doing, it's like, we want to use it because we believe in some of those things that are, they enhance the runner's experience. They enhance the people who are following their friends, the friends and family who are following these people. So we want to give them that experience as well. But other things, we used to print, for example, a 15-page course guide, and on paper, and it was like, go to this rock, turn left, go to this rock, cross this stream, go right, that kind of thing. But now with Strava and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of allowed us to do some different things in terms of how we manage the event. And then the other thing is again, how we bring Hardrock experience to more people who aren't in Silverton.
Mm. So putting a finer point on it, I'd love to maybe talk about how you deal with criticism. Like I said, there is infinite demand. The race only has 145 slots. And in the past several years, I mean, I can recall at least a few instances where your personal integrity and the reputation of the race are called into question, in my view, very unfairly. How have you dealt with that?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing that we try to do is we try to communicate what we do, and we try to be clear in what we're doing. That's why we spend a lot of time trying to explain the lottery. We have that on our website, that kind of thing. So I think communication is the key. It hurts when people are, saying that I'm playing favorites, or, we have, there's a lot of frustration out there. I call it lottery fatigue, lottery frustration, that kind of thing. But I just encourage people, if I hear of that, then I do try to reach out to them and say, what's your issue, and that kind of thing, and try to explain, being the teacher, right? Being the teacher in me, I want to educate them and try to solve the problem. But it hurts when I read things. And then the other part is, do you want to get down in the mud and want to wrestle with them? And sometimes it's really hard to bite my tongue or whatever. But I know in the greater thing, the greater good, for the greater good, or in the bigger picture, it's not going to do much good for me to just try to respond to every single comment that's critical of my management or of our event or things like that. I don't know. I don't know. At some point you do get, I don't want to say immune to it, because it still hurts, but you realize that it's part of it's just part of, heavy the head that wears the crown.
Right.
And, it just comes with the territory.
And you said at the beginning of our conversation that you're fundamentally a conflict avoidant person. So I bet it does hurt your feelings, and probably is hard to bite your tongue sometimes, not only for you, but probably for members of the board too. And I want to come around and talk about the board and the structure of the organization. But maybe before we get to it, if there's anything specific you want to say about some of the recent evolutions. I know, for example, me being on the wait list this year was different than wait lists in years past, in that I needed a male finisher, a previous finisher of the race who's male, to drop out in order for me to move up the wait list. So maybe in addition to that, if there's other things, or you could explain the rationale behind that change in rule, and anything else that has happened recently that you think is relevant to the listeners. Yeah.
Again, this is educational, probably, because they're going, well, don't you just have a lottery? Don't you just put all your names in it and just draw? It's like, oh, no. We have the full computing power of Los Alamos National Labs at our disposal. So we can figure out many different ways. But at the end of it, it's trying to be the fairest we can to the people who have similar experiences. So what we do is the Dylan Bowmans of the world who have finished Hardrock, we put them in one jar or whatever, and you have your own wait list, and you work through the wait list that way. People who have never experienced Hardrock, we put them all in a separate category, and then again, male and female for each of those. We have tried to make it a little bit less convoluted by just basically saying you either finished or you didn't. It's not. We used to do it by the number of finishes, and we used to have 6 lotteries. Now we're down to 4 lotteries, and so. But it's a matter of, if somebody who has finished Hardrock drops out, then we feel like somebody else who has experienced Hardrock should take their place, kind of thing. And a lot of it was born out of, if a woman drops out of the lottery, for example, a woman should take that position to help balance things out. To keep things balanced. Right. So maybe going back to the structure of the organization, you could use that rule as an example, but I'd love to just kind of hear, of course, on the website, it lists the board
of directors for the race and then a run committee. So if you could kind of explain the difference between the two, how you as the run director interface
I'm the interface
with those two groups, and just generally how decisions like that are made and the people at the table.
Yeah, exactly. We incorporated as a 501c3 about 18 years ago. And so as part of that, because then we could get, people could make donations to like the Joel Zucker Scholarship and that kind of thing. And they could, if they spent a lot of money, because we realize that volunteers, which is the backbone of our organization, they're making a financial and a time commitment. And so if they can somehow, use their contribution to Hardrock as a tax write-off, for example, by us being a nonprofit, or for corporate partners to be able to say, we want to further some of the goals and initiatives of Hardrock and that whole thing. But we incorporated as a 501c3. And as a result of that, then we did have to have a board of directors. And so the board of directors oversees policy making. Their job is really to set policy, look out for the big picture in terms of, for example, this whole the lottery that we've been talking about, that was a board initiated board policy that was passed. And so these are a group of dedicated men and women who really have certain skills. We've got somebody who's good at accounting, and we have somebody who's good in the legal area and things like that. Just like any other organization or corporation, you have to have a board of directors, not all of whom have ever run Hardrock. Some of them are they're just interested. They came to us because they're interested in helping out and that kind of thing. And they're my boss, because the other thing they do is they hire me. I'm the, in a corporate structure, I'm the executive director of Hardrock. And so their job is to hire me, audit our finances, and then create policies that they think is good for the betterment of the Hardrock event itself. And then it's up to me as the event director, run director, and I sit on the board as well as kind of as a member. But my real work is with a group of 30 fantastic, dedicated, special people who are the run committee. And, so we have the aid station director, and we have communications directors, we have runner tracking coordinators, and we have, just everything that it takes to run Hardrock falls under my purview. And I was counting up for next month. And a lot of them have been around for 20 years. We have total now, our run committee has organized, I'm just looking at right here, 308 Hardrocks.
Wow.
If you take all the times they've been there, and that's a pretty special group of people.
Yeah. Well experienced.
Yes.
Will this be your first year as run director since you retired as a teacher? Yep. How's your life changed since retirement? Do you miss teaching?
I do. I miss the relationships. I miss that part of it. I don't miss the grading. I don't miss, every teacher you talk to is the same thing. If you do it well, you miss the interactions. You don't miss the planning. You don't miss the Sunday night panic of what am I going to do on Monday morning, that kind of thing, the grading and things like that. But I'm terrible. I'm failing at retirement in that sense, because I talk to them at least weekly. My fellow teachers and that kind of thing. But the biggest thing for me, and this kind of comes out of COVID too, is when I retired, my wife and I, we relocated to the Fort Collins area, and so trying to do that, up until this year, I was just on site all the time, and now I'm having to do it through Zoom and, phone calls and things like that, because Fort Collins, for your listeners, is about what do you say, 350, 370 miles away?
Yeah. It's northern Colorado versus southwestern Colorado.
Exactly.
Weren't you Dakota Jones high school teacher?
Yes, I was.
Isn't that the legend? And you're sort of responsible for indoctrinating him into this incredible sport.
Well, yeah, because Dakota, he became he was, and by his own admission, I'm not going to say anything that he wouldn't say himself. He was an okay cross country runner in high school.
Right.
You know, he was okay. He wasn't the state champion or anything like that. But one year he was a volunteer at the engineer aid station, and like the light came on. He goes, "This is so cool, and I want to be part of this so much." And well, the rest is Dakota Jones history. Because
do you reflect on that? Because obviously Dakota and I are of the same generation. He's a few years younger than I am, but he's always been somebody who I've really looked up to,
right,
as an athlete, but also as a person.
Yes.
And you've probably had an opportunity to observe his evolution from being an average high school runner to a world dominating trail runner.
Exactly.
What's that been like?
Yeah. Well, the athletic component, I think, speaks for itself. But Dakota Jones is a quality individual off any trail. You know, his depth of empathy, his depth of thinking, his concern for the issues that he's concerned about, his willingness to live the life that reflects those values and things like that. He's just one of those special, you know, as a teacher, he's one of those special kids that I'll always remember, but that's because, you know, of ultra running, but also he's just a really quality, not only a fantastic athlete, but a quality person.
Lives the values. I think pretty soon he'll be riding his bicycle from Salt Lake City to Olympic Valley, California to take part in Western States. He is.
Is he?
Talk about live your
He's
values.
Already done that. He did that for Pikes Peak. You know, he really does, you know, he believes in these things and he takes action based on those things that he thinks are important. Not
a hypocrite.
Not a bit.
Let's talk about the San Juan Mountain communities. I know part of Hardrock's mission is to have a positive impact on those communities, economic and otherwise. Obviously, tourism is critical for their survival. Can you talk about why that's important as the run director and how those 2 consecutive cancellations with snowpack and COVID impacted the communities? Yeah.
A couple of things. One, I think in that case, you know, Gordon Hardman's vision came true, that we are now seen as a viable economic activity for especially Silverton. I mean, Silverton's the smallest of the 4, the second smallest. Lake City's smaller, but, you know, we provide, and it's almost kind of a double-edged sword. And I want to talk about that in just a second, but some real clean tourism dollars to communities that, especially in the case of Ouray and even more so in Silverton, live and die by tourism and that kind of thing. And it's such an integral part of for their success and their ability to provide for the people who live there year round is the tourism business. Telluride is Telluride, and it's kind. I mean, they've got some things that have really helped them along the way, but you know. Yeah, not having as much of an economic impact on the people of Telluride, are we? No, not a bit. That we're just a little blip on their screen, right? You know. But it's interesting because they are, and sometimes it's personality dependent, because we've actually over the last 2 or 3 years had a couple of people there who've started to get more involved, wanting to be more involved in Hardrock, that kind of thing. So they're starting to see a little bit more of a value to it, but certainly not like Ouray and certainly not like Silverton and or Lake City, see Hardrock. Now, that being said, it's almost that double-edged sword because it brings more people to a resource, the San Juan Mountains and that kind of thing, who may or may not understand the fragility of that environment. They may or may not understand proper trail etiquette. They may not understand some of those things. And so, again, it's incumbent on us as a organization to try to educate and help them learn about the environment so we're not loving it to death.
How much is history still talked about in those communities? Because I'm thinking about the incredible article that I think it was Megan Hicks wrote. It was definitely published on Iron Far, called Sharing the Load. I think it was what it was called, that documents the deep history of mining in the San Juan Mountain communities. Is
It's-
that history?
It's there. It's there. And we celebrate it. That's I'm glad you brought that up, because the legacy of the hard rock mining and the legacy of the hard rock miner as an individual, wild and tough, those it's part of the, and I would say it's probably a little bit less than it was maybe 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, as recreation has become more and more of an economic driver. But you can't go walk down the main street of Silverton and not know that you're in a mining town, that kind of thing. So we celebrate, we incorporate it, in some of the things like our Volunteer of the Year award is the Mother Lode Award, those kind of things. So we try to play along with that.
And having run and finished the race myself, you do get a deep understanding that the trails you travel during the race were built by these hard rock miners looking to make a career in a harsh environment.
Yeah.
I guess maybe one very small detail, personal curiosity thing. There's 145 runners. I recall
146 now. 146. Okay. Gotta get that other one. So we have male and female.
Okay. So explain that to me, because I recall one year it bumped from 140 to 152 and then bumped back down to 145. Explain that decision making. Sure. And now 146. Yeah.
Well, 146 is easy because you got to have an even number for men and for women.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're the guests of the U.S. Bureau of Land Management, the U.S. Forest Service, and they permit us for what they think we can kind of, realistically accommodate on this fragile resource that is the San Juan Mountains. And then they let us, they evaluate us every year, and they go and they walk the trails and they look for damage and that kind of stuff. But we also do a lot of stuff beforehand. So our permit is kind of and that's a big part of it. But then there's the other part of it in terms of how many people, if we bring so many people to Silverton, where are we going to put them in terms of housing? How many people can we really put in the Silverton gym for the award ceremony and those kind of things? And so it's a kind of a fine balance too, especially as we get more and more, and I can't believe I'm saying this, more and more spectators and more people who are just coming to experience hard rock, that space gets a little bit tighter. But we don't want to make it an event where you can't bring your family, you can't bring your friends, you can't have other people share your experience with you. And so it's really about, I was talking with Brad Bishop, who is our aid station director extraordinaire, yesterday about parking and where we're going to put all the cars at Cunningham. Well, you guys are coming into Cunningham, and how do you manage the logistics of increased crowds and not lose that culture and that kind of that small feel, that family feel that we've kind of become known for. Yeah.
I love that you touched on what can Silverton, the town, accommodate, because it's already stretched with a race of 145 people. And I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there who are frustrated. They've been in the lottery for a long time. Who are like, why don't they have 400 or 500 people in the race? And it's like, well, even if you could get the permit, you couldn't fit that many people in Silverton. Right. So,
and they've been really good to work with us, like last year, and we started again, and we're doing it this year. Again, they donated free camping. So we have free camping for 180 spaces and things like that. Yeah. So we're trying to do that. And again, you talk about that evolution of how do things change and that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, there is that balance of how do you not kill the golden goose that, that experience that people want, and if there was an experience and from being there, if it was an event of 3 or 4 times what it is, I'm not sure it would be the same event that you came to the first couple times.
Yeah. Wouldn't be hard rock. let's talk about this year's race as we start to wind down.
Sure.
You sent out an official statement saying something to the effect of Hardrock is a go.
It's a go.
You had done an evaluation of the snowpack. So maybe talk us through in what condition the course is in, any details you can tell me about the snowpack, asking for a friend, as they say. Tell us how the course is.
Well, and you probably know because you've probably been following it. Southwest Colorado, the San Juan Mountains just had an abundant, as other parts. I mean, I think northern New Mexico had the same thing, just an abundant snowfall this year. And in the big picture, that's a good thing because it brought a lot of it out of the drought. But there was a considerable amount of snow. And so what we do is we have actually a gentleman who monitors a couple of snow sites, snow level sites, as well as snow water equivalent sites, things like that, and just monitors it for the empirical data. And then we also have people who are out, they're living in Silverton, they're living in Telluride, they're going and, exploring these trails, and they're talking about, how much snow there is relative to years past and that kind of thing. So there's a little bit of that, of the anecdotal that goes along with it. But when we do this every year, we take a look at things, what the basins that we're running through, we take a look at that every Memorial Day weekend. That's kind of our go, no go time. And for the most part, when it's a normal year, it's no big deal because the melt rate and the snow water equivalent is within the parameters. But this year we kind of had to do some projection and some crossing our fingers and that kind of thing. But you're going to get your feet wet. I'm going to tell you that right now. So tell your friend, they're going to get their feet wet as well.
I still have never changed my shoes or socks in an ultra marathon, so maybe I'll break that streak. I'll bring extra shoes and socks this year.
There you go. Stick them in a drop bag someplace.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
So Dale, you're the only run director in Hardrock history, and as we wind down, I'd love to ask you about succession planning, if that's not weird.
Sure. Sure. No, it's not weird at all.
You're still in your prime. I don't want to suggest you're 1 foot out the door.
I seem to have a little bit more free time now than I used to. Yeah.
But I mean, I wonder just sort of like what your goals are for the future of Hardrock and how you're thinking about your future as the run director.
Right. Yeah. And I'm glad you used that word succession planning, because I think that's something that, I wrestle with, not only for me, but for our run committee, as we're all getting a little bit more, along with experience comes age, and with age come different priorities and things like that. So we talk about it a lot. I still really, really, really enjoy directing Hardrock. It's something that I'm passionate about. I don't know what I would do in July if I weren't in Silverton. So I'm not ready. I'm here. You're the first one. I'm here to say I'm not retiring anytime soon, but ultimately that will probably be a 2 to 3 year process because of the enormity of the mechanics of putting it together. And again, I'm sure Craig Thornley or other 100-mile race directors, say the same thing. And then finally, I'll have a say in it, but it will be our board of directors decision. But my goal would be, when that time comes, hopefully I have that foresight to say, I can give this 2 more years, or I can give this 3 more years, or whatever, and I can pick my heir and the person who's going to follow me. I will tell you that there's a little bit of the organization, but they got to have a passion for it. They got to be able to believe in what Hardrock not only means to the communities, but it means to the people who are coming there. And that's going to be my litmus to see who sits in this chair after I do. Yeah. It's like, who can carry that on.
Well, it's been an incredible run. And again, I don't want to suggest it's
no, not a bit. People ask me that all the time, especially when I retired. They go, well, how much are you going to retire? It's like, well, everything I read about retirement is you don't want to get rid of everything all at once. So I'm thinking getting rid of my 9 to 5 and then moving 400 miles away was probably enough for at least 1 year.
Well, we talked about Betsy Kalmeyer and Kirk App with 20 plus Hardrock finishes. I'd say 31 Hardrock run directions is at least as impressive. Dale, a couple closing questions for you. I sent these to you via email, so they won't be a surprise, but it's been a really fun way to close conversations.
You bet.
I'd love to have you contribute yours here. The first one is, who is one person that you admire inside or outside of sport, living or dead, and why is it that you admire that person?
Can I pick two real quick?
Please. Yeah.
I couldn't come up. One is personal. One is, and we go back to some of those concepts of leadership and things like that. And I've never met the man, but I'm a big college basketball fan. And when I read or watch podcasts or listen to podcasts or watch videos of Mike Krzyzewski, I find so much of what he says resonates with me in terms of, if I could have lunch with him, I would love to have lunch with him. But in terms of how he builds a program that stands for something and how he brings a culture to the Duke men's basketball program. And I know all the UNC, all the North Carolina haters, all the Duke haters are going to like, get out.
Yeah.
But I look at him just, and more from a leadership perspective than anything else, although he does coach a pretty good game of basketball too. Yeah. But just how he deals with people and that kind of thing. And I guess the other one, I know this may sound, I don't know if it sounds weird. I lost my father 100 days ago now, 103 days ago now. And he was a big influence on my life. And a lot of people who came to Hardrock knew my dad because he was there. He was there to support me, and he was there no matter what I needed. He was there. He was my sounding board a lot of times when I needed to bounce something off of, in terms of a decision I had to make. And he is where I learned a little bit about that positive outlook and that sense of optimism and things like that, because that was my dad as well. So
I love it. Thank you so much, Dale. I'm sorry for your loss. And I'm sure that has been hard for you. And I appreciate you also saying a few words about Coach K. I just listened to a great podcast with Shane Battier, who is, of course, a great Duke basketball player. I'll send it to you because he talks a bit about the leadership of Coach K and some of the unique ways that he had an impact on Shane's life.
And can I just tell a quick story about that?
Yes.
Real quick. I know we're going to run out of time, but once I found, he wrote a book called Leading with the Heart. And, and I gave it to my seniors, high school seniors, as part of our student leadership program. I said, you have to lead that. And every kid who came through our leadership program, I tried to convert to becoming a Duke basketball fan. But one year, out of the blue, I just emailed his assistant. I said, hey, I use Leading with the Heart a lot, that kind of thing. Would Coach K, if I bought the books, would he sign them for my seniors as graduation presents? Every year he got them as, individualized things, to Shauna or to Madison, always remember to lead with the heart, Mike Krzyzewski, and that kind of stuff. And it was really a cool thing.
Very, very cool.
Yeah.
Dale, final question for you.
Sure.
What is one truth that you've learned about yourself or about life in general through your experience in sport or as the run director of Hardrock? Right.
I'm choosing to look at Hardrock. How's that? Since that's what this is.
Please. Yeah.
I think what I've learned is there's a fundamental need and an importance to be part of a community that's bigger than yourself. And that we're best when we're a part of that community and working towards a community goal and a community good and that kind of thing. And if there's one thing I've learned directing Hardrock is the value and the importance and the joy of belonging to a community that shares a goal, and a variety of things. Dylan Bowman's going to run, but then we're going to have the volunteers who are going to help him get there. Then we're going to help, the town that celebrates him as well and that kind of thing. So this concept of Hardrock has taught me about the importance of community and what a meaningful part of life that can be.
What a beautiful place to end, Dale. It's been a joy to have you on the podcast. I really appreciate you.
I love it. Making
the time, and looking forward to seeing you in Silverton.
Couple weeks.
All right.
Get off the couch.
Until then.
Yeah. Okay.